In the dimly lit corridors of a forgotten space station orbiting a dying star, an alien princess named Leora stumbled through the wreckage of her once mighty empire. Her slender frame, adorned with tattered remnants of royal garments that shimmered faintly even in decay, moved with desperate urgency. The soft glow from emergency lights cast long shadows across her pale lavender skin, highlighting the intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings that pulsed erratically with each labored breath. Leora's people, the Zenthari, had been renowned throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and graceful culture. Their civilization had flourished among the stars, their crystalline cities floating like jewels in the cosmic sea. Yet now, those same cities lay in ruins, their people scattered or enslaved by the relentless expansion of the Krillian Empire. The proud lineage of Zenthari royalty, stretching back countless generations, had been reduced to this single survivor, a princess whose very existence was considered an embarrassment by her conquerors. Her rejection had begun at home, where traditionalists within her own court had deemed her unworthy of the throne due to her mixed heritage. Her mother, Queen Silvara, had fallen in love with a human diplomat during a rare diplomatic mission to Earth decades ago. This union, while initially celebrated as a symbol of interstellar unity, had become a source of shame when the Krillians began their campaign of conquest. The purists argued that Leora's human blood made her weak, her emotions too volatile, her presence a constant reminder of their vulnerability. As the Krillian forces swept through Zenthari space, systematically destroying everything in their path, Leora found herself increasingly isolated. Her advisors whispered behind closed doors about how her human traits had cursed their people. When the final assault came, her own guards refused to protect her, leaving her to flee alone through secret passages known only to the royal family. The weight of her people's suffering pressed heavily upon her shoulders, each lost life a fresh wound upon her soul. Now, as she navigated the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels of the derelict station, Leora clutched a small holographic locket containing the last images of her family. The device flickered intermittently, threatening to erase the precious memories forever. Her violet eyes, inherited from her human father, glistened with unshed tears as she watched her mother's recorded message one more time. "Remember, my daughter," Queen Silvara's voice echoed softly, "strength isn't measured by power alone, but by the courage to embrace who you truly are." The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, causing Leora to stumble against a bulkhead. Her fingers brushed against cold metal as she steadied herself, feeling the rough texture of rust beneath her touch. Each step forward felt like moving through quicksand, the weight of her past dragging at her heels. She knew she couldn't remain hidden forever. The Krillian hunters would eventually track her down. But where could she go? Every friendly world had either fallen to the invaders or turned its back on the disgraced princess. In her heart, Leora carried not just the burden of her royal heritage, but also the deep-seated knowledge that she represented something more than just a failed monarchy. Her very existence challenged the rigid boundaries between species, cultures, and traditions. Yet this same uniqueness that should have been her greatest strength had become her most profound curse, leaving her rejected by both her own people and the wider galaxy they had once called home. Corporal Marcus Kane adjusted his rifle strap as he patrolled the lower levels of the station, his boots echoing against the metal grating. The veteran soldier had seen enough combat zones to recognize the signs of recent occupation: scorch marks on the walls, hastily abandoned equipment, and the faint hum of deactivated security systems. His unit had been sent to investigate reports of Krillian activity in the sector, but so far, the only signs of life were the occasional maintenance drones still performing their programmed tasks long after their masters had fled. Marcus's thoughts drifted to his own complicated past as he methodically checked each corridor. Born on Earth to a military family, he had joined the armed forces seeking purpose and belonging. Instead, he found himself increasingly disillusioned with the bureaucracy and politics that often dictated military actions. His superiors had never fully trusted him, viewing his independent thinking as a liability rather than an asset. The scars on his face, souvenirs from various battles, seemed to mirror the emotional wounds of being passed over for promotions and consistently assigned to the most dangerous missions. The soldier's enhanced hearing picked up a faint sound, the soft scrape of movement against metal. Instinctively, he flattened himself against the wall, his weapon ready. The sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by what might have been a suppressed sob. His tactical training warred with his natural curiosity as he crept toward the source of the noise. Rounding a corner, he froze at the sight before him. There, crouched in the shadows, was the most extraordinary creature he'd ever encountered. Her luminous form seemed to pulse with an inner light, casting strange patterns on the walls around her. Despite her obvious distress, there was an undeniable regality in her posture, even as she attempted to make herself smaller. Marcus's first thought wasn't of potential threat, but of beauty, a beauty that transcended species and spoke directly to something primal within him. He lowered his weapon slightly, though kept it ready. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, switching his translator to automatic mode. To his surprise, the figure responded in halting but understandable galactic standard. "Please, help me." Her voice trembled, carrying notes of desperation that resonated deeply with Marcus's own experiences of isolation and rejection. The corporal's tactical mind raced through possibilities. Protocol demanded he report any alien contact immediately, but something about this situation felt different. The way she held herself, despite her obvious fear, suggested someone accustomed to command. Her mixed features hinted at a complex heritage that reminded him uncomfortably of his own struggles to fit into neat categories. Most telling was the look in her eyes. Not just fear, but a profound sadness that spoke of loss beyond measure. Marcus took a cautious step forward, his military training warring with an unexpected surge of protectiveness. He had spent years building walls around his emotions, learning to view every interaction through the lens of duty and protocol. Yet here, in this forgotten corner of space, faced with this mysterious being, those carefully constructed barriers began to crumble. The irony wasn't lost on him. The universe had sent him, a soldier rejected by his own kind, to encounter an alien princess rejected by hers. "Who are you?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither could fully comprehend. In that moment, two lonely souls from vastly different worlds found themselves connected by threads of shared pain and mutual understanding, though neither could yet see where these threads might lead. Leora emerged fully from the shadows, her movements hesitant yet deliberate. The conflicting emotions playing across her delicate features mirrored Marcus's own internal struggle. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she stood mere feet from the human soldier. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed rapidly, betraying her anxiety despite her attempt at composure. "I am Leora," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. "Last of the Zenthari royal line." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he processed her words. The historical significance of her statement hit him like a physical blow. The Zenthari had been legendary allies to humanity during the early days of space exploration. He remembered studying their culture in military history courses, marveling at their sophisticated society and their pioneering work in interspecies diplomacy. Now, standing before him was the sole survivor of that once great civilization, reduced to hiding in the ruins of a derelict station. "I know what you must think," Leora continued, her violet eyes searching his face. "A princess begging for help from a common soldier. It is undignified." Her voice caught on the last word, and she quickly averted her gaze. Marcus noticed how her hands trembled slightly, clutching at the folds of her tattered gown as if seeking some semblance of dignity in her ruined finery. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken understanding. Marcus recognized the careful dance of pride and desperation in her posture. He'd seen it in his own reflection often enough. He cleared his throat, choosing his words with care. "I've been where you are," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "Fighting to prove myself worthy, even when everyone else has written me off." Leora's head snapped up, her eyes widening in surprise. For the first time since their encounter, Marcus saw genuine emotion break through her carefully maintained facade. Not just fear or desperation, but recognition. She took another step closer, close enough that he could see the subtle iridescence in her skin, like oil on water. "You understand," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "The feeling of being trapped between worlds, belonging nowhere." Their connection deepened with each passing moment, forged in the fires of shared rejection. Marcus found himself lowering his weapon completely, though his tactical mind screamed at him to maintain protocol. Something about Leora's vulnerability resonated with his own experiences of being an outsider, the son of military parents who never quite fit into civilian life, nor fully belonged in the rigid hierarchy of the armed forces. "The Krillians," Leora began, then hesitated, her markings pulsing erratically. They destroyed everything. My people, my home. All because I wasn't pure enough for their ideals. Her voice broke on the last word, and Marcus instinctively reached out, catching her arm as her knees buckled. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. Her skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and impossibly smooth beneath his calloused fingers. "They're hunting me," she continued, leaning slightly into his support despite her obvious effort to maintain royal decorum. "Not just because I'm Zenthari, but because I represent everything they fear, the blending of species, the breaking of boundaries." Her eyes locked onto his, and Marcus saw the depth of her loneliness reflected there. "You're the first person in cycles who hasn't looked at me with either pity or contempt." The weight of their shared understanding settled between them, heavier than any royal title or military rank. Marcus realized he was still holding her arm, and instead of releasing her, he gently guided her to sit on a nearby maintenance crate. His tactical mind continued to process the situation, noting how her breathing slowed in his presence, how her bioluminescent patterns began to stabilize. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they spoke the same language of isolation and longing for acceptance. Leora reached into the folds of her gown, producing the flickering holographic locket. With trembling fingers, she activated it, projecting images of a glittering Zenthari city, of smiling faces that now existed only in memory. "This was my home," she whispered. "And now it's gone. Everything I was supposed to protect, everything I was meant to be." Her voice trailed off as tears finally spilled over, tracing luminous paths down her cheeks. Marcus watched, helpless against the wave of empathy that crashed over him. He had always prided himself on maintaining professional distance, on compartmentalizing emotions to focus on the mission. Yet here he was, watching an alien princess fall apart in front of him, and all he wanted to do was offer comfort. The irony wasn't lost on him. The universe had brought together two broken souls, each rejected by their respective worlds, in the most unlikely of circumstances. Without conscious thought, Marcus reached out, brushing away a tear from Leora's cheek. Her skin felt electric beneath his touch, sending a shiver through both of them. "You're not alone anymore," he heard himself say, the words escaping before he could analyze their implications. Leora's eyes widened, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brightly in response. For a moment, neither moved, suspended in a fragile bubble of understanding that transcended species, rank, and circumstance. The revelation of their shared isolation created an invisible thread connecting Leora and Marcus, weaving through the darkness of their pasts and binding them in ways neither could have anticipated. As they sat amidst the detritus of a forgotten station, surrounded by the ghosts of civilizations past, their initial wariness transformed into something deeper and more complex. Leora's hand, still trembling slightly, found its way to Marcus's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that defied both their cultural programming and practical logic. "You shouldn't trust me," Marcus murmured, though he made no move to withdraw his hand. "I'm just a soldier following orders. Helping you could be considered treason." His words carried the weight of bitter experience, each syllable shaped by years of being used and discarded by those in power. Yet even as he spoke, his thumb traced gentle circles on Leora's palm, contradicting his cautionary tone. "And I should despise you," Leora replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil evident in her pulsing markings. "Your people abandoned mine when we needed allies most. Yet here you are, offering comfort when no one else would." She lifted their joined hands, examining them as if searching for answers in their contrasting textures, her smooth iridescent skin against his rough, battle-worn fingers. The irony of their situation wasn't lost on either of them. Two beings, each rejected by their respective societies, finding solace in the most forbidden of connections. Marcus's military training screamed at him to maintain distance, to remember his duty and the consequences of fraternization with an alien, let alone a royal one. Yet every fiber of his being rebelled against these ingrained responses, drawn inexorably to the authenticity of Leora's pain and the genuine connection they shared. "I've spent my life proving I belong," Marcus confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "First in the military, then among humans who saw me as too different, too questioning. And now—" He gestured helplessly at their surroundings, at the vast emptiness of space beyond the station's corroded walls. "Now I find myself questioning everything I thought I knew about loyalty and duty." Leora's free hand rose to touch his scarred cheek, her touch feather-light yet electrifying. Among my people, mixing bloodlines was once celebrated. My parents' union was meant to symbolize unity between species. Instead, it marked me as an outcast, a living reminder of our vulnerability. Her voice caught, but she pressed on. The Krillians didn't just attack us. They attacked the very idea of connection between different peoples. They feared what we represented, the possibility of something new emerging from diverse origins. Their eyes met, reflecting twin pools of understanding. Marcus felt the walls he'd built around his heart begin to crack, each fissure allowing more of Leora's presence to seep through. He saw in her not just a princess in distress, but a kindred spirit who understood the pain of existing between worlds, of being too much of one thing and not enough of another. The irony of their meeting, a rejected soldier and a disowned princess finding common ground in their shared status as outsiders, struck him with almost physical force. "We're both survivors," Marcus observed, his voice thick with emotion. "Both running from things we can't change, carrying burdens we never asked for." He tightened his grip on her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "But maybe we don't have to run alone anymore." Leora's bioluminescent patterns shifted, swirling in complex patterns that seemed to echo his words. "In my culture, there's an ancient saying, true strength lies not in purity, but in the ability to bridge differences. My parents believed in this, even when others turned against them. Perhaps." She hesitated, her markings pulsing erratically. "Perhaps our meeting isn't just coincidence. Maybe it's a chance to prove that connection is worth fighting for, regardless of the cost." The weight of their shared understanding settled between them, heavier than any royal decree or military order. Through their intertwined fingers, Marcus felt the subtle vibration of Leora's pulse, matching the rapid beat of his own heart. The irony of their situation. Two individuals rejected by their respective worlds finding acceptance in each other, created a paradox that neither could fully comprehend, yet both instinctively understood. In that moment, amid the ruins of failed civilizations and broken dreams, they forged a bond that transcended their individual pains, creating something new and potentially revolutionary from their shared experiences of rejection and longing. As their connection deepened, the reality of their situation began to impose itself upon their fragile sanctuary. The station's environmental systems groaned in protest, ancient machinery struggling to maintain atmosphere against the vacuum beyond. Warning lights flickered erratically, casting their joined figures in strobing crimson hues that seemed to undo the gravity of their predicament. Marcus felt the familiar tug of duty warring with the newfound pull of emotional connection, each impulse demanding his complete attention. "We can't stay here," he said finally, reluctantly withdrawing his hand from Leora's grasp. The absence of her warmth left his palm tingling, a physical reminder of their brief moment of connection. "The Krillians will find this station eventually, and when they do—" He didn't need to finish the thought. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air between them. Leora straightened, her royal bearing reasserting itself despite her current circumstances. "I cannot return to my people. What remains of them would see me as a traitor for consorting with a human soldier." Her voice carried the weight of generations of prejudice and expectation. "Yet neither can I ask you to abandon your duty to protect me." The complexity of their situation manifested in the subtle dance of her bioluminescent patterns, shifting through colors that seemed to reflect her internal conflict. Marcus watched these changes with growing fascination, recognizing in them a language more expressive than words. Her markings pulsed with determination, then uncertainty, then resolve, each transition speaking volumes about the decision she struggled to make. "My superiors would see this as fraternization at best, treason at worst," Marcus admitted, pacing the narrow corridor as he worked through the tactical implications. "Helping you escape would mean going AWOL, possibly starting an interstellar incident." He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "But leaving you here, knowing what I know now." He shook his head, unable to articulate the depth of his resistance to that option. The irony of their position struck him anew. A soldier trained to follow orders contemplating desertion to protect an alien princess who had been rejected by her own kind. The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so deadly serious. Every instinct honed through years of military service screamed at him to maintain distance, to treat this as just another mission objective. Yet his heart, stubbornly resistant to such rational calculations, insisted on seeing Leora as more than just a target for extraction or elimination. Leora stepped closer, her movements graceful despite the tension radiating from her form. Among my people, there was a tradition, when all hope seemed lost, a royal could petition for sanctuary through marriage. Her words emerged in a rush, as if she feared losing her courage mid-sentence. It was meant to forge alliances, to create bonds stronger than political treaties. She paused, her markings flaring bright with emotion. I know it's impossible, inappropriate, but I would rather beg a human soldier for protection than face capture by the Krillians. The gravity of her words settled between them like a physical presence. Marcus felt the weight of history pressing down upon his shoulders. Centuries of interspecies diplomacy, of wars fought and peace negotiated, all culminating in this moment of raw vulnerability. He understood the implications of what she was suggesting, the monumental nature of such a request from someone of her station. Yet beneath the layers of protocol and tradition, he recognized the fundamental truth of her position. She was asking not just for protection, but for connection, for acceptance that transcended the artificial barriers erected by both their societies. You're asking me to choose between my duty and... Marcus's voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The tactical part of his mind raced through scenarios, calculating probabilities and risks. The emotional side, however, focused solely on the luminous figure before him, her very presence challenging everything he thought he knew about loyalty, honor, and purpose. The irony of their situation. Two outcasts finding each other in the most improbable of circumstances, created a paradox that defied conventional military wisdom and royal protocol alike. In the tense silence that followed Leora's proposal, the station's aging systems provided an ominous backdrop to their dilemma. The distant hum of failing power conduits merged with the soft hiss of leaking atmosphere, creating a symphony of impending disaster that underscored the urgency of their decision. Marcus paced the corridor, his boots ringing against the metal grating in an irregular rhythm that matched his racing thoughts. Each step echoed like a countdown, pushing them closer to a choice that would irrevocably alter both their destinies. Leora remained motionless, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing in complex rhythms that seemed to mirror the chaos of her emotions. She watched Marcus's agitated movements with an intensity that belied her outward calm, her violet eyes tracking his every step. The irony of their situation crystallized in this moment. A princess of a fallen empire, reduced to pleading for protection from a soldier who had spent his career being overlooked by his own command structure, both of them trapped in a web of duty and desire that neither had chosen but both now had to navigate. This isn't just about personal feelings, Marcus finally spoke, his voice tight with the effort of maintaining control. If I agree to this, it won't just affect us. The political ramifications. He stopped, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Hell, even if we somehow managed to make it work, the Krillians would see it as the ultimate betrayal of their ideals. They'd hunt us relentlessly. But isn't that exactly what they fear? Leora countered, her voice gaining strength. The union of different species, the breaking down of barriers they've worked so hard to maintain? She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. My parents believed that such connections were the future of our galaxy. That's why they married, despite the opposition. Now you stand here, presented with the same opportunity, to challenge the status quo, to prove that connection is stronger than division. The weight of her words settled between them, heavier than any royal decree or military order. Marcus felt the irony of his position keenly, trained to follow commands, yet faced with a decision that defied conventional authority structures. His tactical mind continued to calculate risks and probabilities, but his heart responded to the genuine conviction in Leora's voice, to the way her markings pulsed with determination despite her obvious fear. "Do you understand what you're asking?" he questioned, his voice rough with emotion. "Marriage isn't just a piece of paper, especially not under these circumstances. It would mean abandoning everything I've ever known, becoming a target for both our peoples." He stepped closer, his military bearing giving way to raw honesty. "And yet, I can't deny that I feel this connection between us. This impossible, illogical bond that makes no sense but feels more real than anything I've experienced before." Leora reached out, her hand hovering inches from his chest before making contact. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt through both of them, a physical manifestation of the electricity that had been building between them since their first encounter. Among my people, such connections were once considered sacred, she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. Not because of royal bloodlines or political alliances, but because they represented the possibility of growth, of evolution beyond our limitations. The station shuddered slightly, a reminder of their precarious situation. Marcus caught himself reaching for his weapon instinctively, then forced his hand to remain at his side. The soldier in him wanted to maintain vigilance, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with Krillian forces. The man who had found an unexpected connection with an alien princess wanted nothing more than to lose himself in the moment, to pretend that their problems could be solved by simple proximity. "I've spent my life proving I belong," Marcus confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "To my unit, to humanity, to the chain of command. Now you're asking me to walk away from all that, to embrace something that neither of our societies would accept." He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "The irony isn't lost on me. Two people rejected by their own kind finding acceptance in each other. It's either the most beautiful thing I've ever encountered or the most dangerous." Their eyes met, reflecting twin pools of understanding and uncertainty. Leora's markings shifted through a spectrum of colors, each hue representing a different facet of their dilemma. Marcus recognized in those patterns a language more expressive than words, a visual representation of the complex emotions neither could fully articulate. The irony of their situation, a soldier and a princess, both outcasts in their respective worlds, finding common ground in their shared status as outsiders, created a paradox that defied conventional wisdom yet felt fundamentally right. "We don't have to decide right now," Leora said finally, though her hand remained pressed against his chest. "But we do need to acknowledge that whatever choice we make will change everything. Not just for us, but potentially for our peoples." Her voice carried the weight of generations, of royal responsibility merging with personal desire in a way that transcended individual concerns. Marcus covered her hand with his own, feeling the subtle vibrations of her pulse against his palm. "That's what scares me most," he admitted. "Not the danger, not the rejection from our societies, but the possibility that we might actually be able to make a difference. That our connection might mean something larger than ourselves." He drew a deep breath, the recycled air of the station suddenly feeling too thin to contain the magnitude of their situation. "And that maybe, just maybe, being rejected by our own worlds has prepared us for something greater than either of us could have imagined." The gravity of their position settled between them, heavier than any royal title or military rank. Through their joined hands, they felt the subtle tremors of the station, a physical manifestation of the instability surrounding their lives. The irony of their meeting, two broken souls finding solace in the most forbidden of connections, created a paradox that neither could fully comprehend, yet both instinctively understood. In that moment, amid the ruins of failed civilizations and broken dreams, they stood on the precipice of a decision that would redefine not just their personal fates, but potentially the future of interspecies relations in the galaxy. As their conversation continued, the station's deteriorating condition served as a stark reminder of the limited time they had to make their decision. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, illuminating their faces in harsh, erratic flashes that seemed to emphasize the urgency of their situation. Marcus instinctively pulled Leora closer, shielding her from the falling debris with his body. The intimate gesture, born of protective instinct rather than conscious choice, sent a jolt of awareness through both of them. "We can't keep running," Leora whispered against his chest, her voice muffled but resolute. "Every moment we delay makes us more vulnerable." Her bioluminescent patterns flared brightly, pulsing in time with her accelerated heartbeat. "The Krillians aren't just hunting me, they're hunting the idea I represent. If they catch us together." Marcus tightened his hold on her, feeling the subtle vibrations of her body against his. The soldier in him recognized the tactical disadvantage of their position, while the man who had found an unexpected connection with this alien princess felt only the need to protect her at all costs. "We need a plan," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "But any move we make will have consequences far beyond our personal safety." The irony of their situation crystallized in that moment. Two individuals who had spent their lives being told they didn't belong, now facing a decision that could potentially redefine what belonging meant in the context of interspecies relations. Leora pulled back slightly, her luminous eyes searching his face. "My parents believed that true strength came from embracing difference, not denying it. Their union was meant to prove that point. Her voice caught, but she pressed on. Now we stand at a crossroads, presented with a chance to demonstrate that their vision wasn't naive idealism, but a path forward for our peoples. Marcus's tactical mind raced through possibilities, each scenario presenting its own set of complications. Moving Leora to a secure location would require resources and allies they currently lacked. Declaring their intention to marry would spark immediate controversy and likely draw unwanted attention from both their governments. Yet staying hidden on this failing station offered no long-term solution, and separation seemed equally impossible given the depth of their connection. The station shuddered again, more violently this time, forcing them to brace against the wall. Leora's hand found his, their fingers intertwining instinctively. Among my people, there was a saying, when the old structures fail, it's time to build something new. Her voice carried the weight of generations, of royal responsibility merging with personal conviction. Perhaps our meeting isn't just coincidence. Maybe it's an opportunity to create something stronger than what came before. Marcus felt the truth of her words resonate deep within him. His military training had taught him to value order and hierarchy, yet his experiences had shown him the limitations of rigid structures. Here, in the arms of an alien princess who embodied everything his superiors had warned against, he found himself questioning fundamental assumptions about loyalty, duty, and purpose. The irony of their position, two outcasts finding each other in the most improbable of circumstances, created a paradox that defied conventional wisdom yet felt fundamentally right. We need allies, Marcus stated, his tactical mind beginning to organize their options. People who understand the importance of interspecies cooperation, who might be willing to risk helping us. He glanced at Leora, noting how her markings had stabilized into a steady glow of determination. There are factions within both our governments who believe in peaceful coexistence. If we could reach them. But reaching them means exposing ourselves, Leora countered, though her grip on his hand remained firm. Every transmission could be intercepted, every move tracked by those who would see our union as a threat to their power. She paused, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through a spectrum of emotions. Yet remaining hidden offers no real solution. The station won't hold much longer, and our supplies are limited. The complexity of their situation manifested in the subtle dance of her markings, each color representing a different facet of their dilemma. Marcus recognized in those patterns a language more expressive than words, a visual representation of the calculations running through both their minds. The irony of their meeting, a soldier trained to follow orders contemplating rebellion to protect an alien princess who had been rejected by her own kind, created a paradox that defied conventional military wisdom and royal protocol alike. We need to decide soon, Marcus acknowledged, his voice heavy with the weight of their position. Every moment we delay increases the risk. He drew a deep breath, feeling the recycled air of the station grow thinner with each passing second. But rushing into a decision without considering all the implications could be just as dangerous. We're not just talking about our lives here. We're discussing the possibility of changing the course of interspecies relations. Leora nodded, her royal bearing reasserting itself despite their precarious situation. Then let's consider our options carefully, she suggested, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her form. We may be outcasts from our respective worlds, but perhaps that very status gives us the freedom to forge a new path. Her markings pulsed with renewed strength, reflecting the determination in her eyes. After all, sometimes it takes those who have nothing left to lose to create something truly revolutionary. As they stood together in the failing station, their joined hands a symbol of their impossible connection, the gravity of their situation settled between them like a physical presence. The irony of their position, two individuals rejected by their own societies finding acceptance in each other, created a paradox that defied conventional wisdom yet felt fundamentally necessary. In that moment, amid the ruins of failed civilizations and broken dreams, they faced a decision that would redefine not just their personal fates, but potentially the future of interspecies relations in the galaxy.